I walked away from my son on Thanksgiving Day, and everything changed the moment that door closed behind me. Let me tell you straight, I'm Clarence Monroe, and up until last November, I thought I knew what family meant. I thought it meant loyalty. I thought it meant remembering who raised you, who paid for your college, who handed over the down payment on your first house without blinking. I thought family meant something. I was wrong about that. The worst part. I didn't see it coming. Not really. Sure, the phone calls had gotten fewer. Yeah, the invitations dried up after my wife Nora passed. But I still held on to this idea that when it mattered, my son Eli would come through. That blood meant something. That love, real love, couldn't just disappear because life got busy. I was a fool. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. That Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early with this feeling in my chest. Not excitement exactly, but something close to it. Hope, maybe. I got dressed in the brown sweater Nora had knitted for me years ago, the one with the little hole near the bottom that I never bothered to fix. It felt like wearing her with me. I baked 2 apple pies using her recipe, the exact one. The same measurements, the same care. My hands remembered the motion, even though it had been 3 years since she'd been in that kitchen. I didn't call ahead. That was my mistake, looking back. But I was afraid if I called, Melissa would find some excuse. She'd done it before. So I loaded those pies carefully into my car and drove the few miles to their house, and I told myself this was the day everything would turn around. The street was lined with cars. I could see them parked bumper to bumper, and through the windows, I caught glimpses of people, lots of them. Laughter. The sound of a family celebrating together. My stomach tightened a little, but I parked and grabbed those pies anyway. I rang the doorbell. Melissa answered, and the second she saw me, something happened to her face. It just went cold. Like someone had switched off a light behind her eyes. "Clarence," she said. Not, "Hi Dad." Not, "We're so glad to see you." Just my first name, flat and careful. "It's Thanksgiving," I said, holding up the pies like they were a peace offering. "Thought I'd come celebrate with my family." She looked at those pies. Then she looked at me. Then she called inside, "Eli, your father's here." When my son came to the door, he looked uncomfortable before he even opened his mouth. I could see it in the way his shoulders sat, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Dad, you should have called," he said. I laughed a little then, thinking he was joking. "I'm your father, Eli. I don't need an appointment to spend Thanksgiving with you." But Melissa was already shaking her head. "There's no room. The table's completely full, and we barely made enough food." I looked past her into that dining room. The table was massive, and every single chair had someone sitting in it. I counted maybe 15 people. Friends, neighbors, in-laws. Everyone had a full plate. Everyone had a place. Except me. My heart did something strange in my chest. Dropped, maybe. Or stopped for a second. Eli shifted his weight. "Maybe we can fix you a small plate, Dad," he said quietly, like he was asking permission from someone I couldn't see. That's when Melissa reached into the cabinet and pulled out a plastic plate. Not ceramic. Not the good dishes they'd probably given away as wedding gifts from the house I'd funded. A throwaway plate. She grabbed some cold turkey scraps, tossed a few potatoes on it, and set that plate on the floor. On the actual floor. Next to the kitchen island, like I was a dog waiting for scraps. "There," she said. "You can eat there. We're about to say grace." I stood there for maybe 5 seconds, just staring at that plate on the floor. I couldn't make sense of it. Not in a way my brain wanted to accept. This was my son's wife. This was my house I'd helped them buy. This was Thanksgiving, and I was holding homemade pies, and my own son wouldn't even look at me. I set those pies down on the counter real gentle, like they were made of something fragile. "I can see I came to the wrong house," I said. Then I turned around and walked out. The laughter picked right back up before I even hit the sidewalk. I could hear it through the door. Nobody called after me. Nobody tried to stop me. Just the sound of them going back to their dinner, their celebration, like I'd never been there at all. But here's what they didn't know yet. I was about to teach them all what walking away really means. And by tomorrow morning, they'd be begging for the chance to put that plate back on the table where it belonged. The walk home that night felt like it took forever. Cold November air bit at my face, and the streetlights blurred as my eyes watered. But I wasn't crying. Not exactly. I was something worse than crying. I was empty. When I got to my house, that quiet, lonely house that still smelled like Nora's lavender sachets even after 3 years, I set the second pie down on the kitchen table and I just sat in the dark. Didn't turn on lights. Didn't put on the news. Just sat there listening to the clock on the wall tick, tick, ticking away the evening. I thought about everything I'd given Eli. Not just money, though there was plenty of that. I'm talking about time. I'm talking about staying up until 3 in the morning helping him with science projects when he was 9. I'm talking about teaching him to change a tire on the side of the road, about working double shifts at the auto plant so he could go to college instead of the factory like I did. I thought about the down payment. $50,000. Money I'd saved for 20 years. Money that was supposed to be my cushion for when my body gave out. And I handed it over without hesitation because he was my son, and that's what you do. I stood up and walked to the living room. Nora's picture was hanging there on the wall, same spot it had been since she died. She was smiling in that picture the way she always smiled, like she knew something good was coming, like she believed the world was worth the effort. "Maybe you had the right idea," I whispered to her photo. "Leaving when you did." That night, I didn't sleep much. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and somewhere around 4 in the morning, something shifted inside me. The hollow feeling started hardening into something else. Something colder. By the time the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. I got out of bed, showered, put on my good pants and my church shirt. Then I drove straight to the bank. I'd never told anyone about the second trust account. It was my secret, my final gift to my son. Over the past 15 years, every time I had extra money, every tax refund, every bonus, every dollar I could scrape together, I put it into that account. The plan was to leave it to Eli when I died. A legacy. A thank you for being my son. But that was before the plastic plate. I walked up to the manager's desk, and she recognized me right away because I'd been banking there for almost 30 years. "Mr. Monroe," she said, smiling. "What can I do for you?" "I need to withdraw everything from account number 4478, I said. "And I need it today." She looked confused, but she didn't ask questions. Within 20 minutes, I was walking out of that bank with a cashier's check for $235,000. Money that was supposed to be Eli's. Money he'd never know he'd almost had. From there, I drove straight to attorney Leonard Chase's office. Leonard had helped me set up my will after Nora died, and he knew my business better than most people know their own families. "Clarence," he said when I walked in, "this is unexpected. Is everything all right?" "I need to change my will," I said. "Everything. All of it." He leaned back in his chair, and I could see the questions forming in his mind, but he was smart enough not to ask them. We spent the next hour going through my assets. The house. The savings. The retirement accounts. Everything I'd built over a lifetime of honest work. "Where do you want it to go?" Leonard asked. I pulled out a piece of paper I'd written on the night before, sitting at my kitchen table in the dark. "The Nora Monroe Foundation," I said. "Scholarships for kids who aged out of foster care. Kids with nobody. Kids who know what it's like to have nothing and nobody to show up for them. Leonard looked at the paper, then at me. Clarence, I want to make sure you're thinking clearly about this. Your son. My son put a plate on the floor for me, I said quietly. That's all you need to know. By noon, my new will was signed, sealed, and official. Every penny I'd worked my entire life to build was going somewhere else. Anywhere but to Eli. When I left that office, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. Like I'd set down something I'd been carrying my whole life without even knowing the weight of it. That afternoon, my phone rang. Eli's name showed up on the screen. Hello. I answered. Dad, what happened last night? His voice had this edge to it, like he was confused or maybe annoyed. Melissa said you just left. That was pretty rude. I took a breath. A long one. Rude. I said back. You watched your wife put a plate on the floor for me, Eli. Your own father. And you stood there and let her do it. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. You're overreacting, he said finally. She was stressed. We had guests. It wasn't that serious. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. Once you're there, you stop being afraid of falling. And I was at the bottom. Don't call me again until you understand what you did, I said. Then I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in 3 years, since Nora died, I felt something close to peace. And I knew that peace would only last so long. Because sometimes, people need to lose everything to understand what they had. 3 weeks passed, and I didn't hear a word from Eli. Not a call. Not a text. Not even an email. Christmas came and went without so much as a card in my mailbox. I spent it the same way I'd spent Thanksgiving, alone, but at least this time, I'd chosen it. I focused on building something instead of mourning what was lost. I registered the Nora Monroe Foundation officially, set up the website myself using YouTube tutorials, and started reaching out to foster care agencies about kids who needed help. The response was immediate. There were dozens of kids, maybe hundreds, waiting for someone to believe in them. I started reviewing applications. A 18-year-old named Marcus who wanted to learn carpentry. A 19-year-old girl named Shay who dreamed of becoming an electrician. These weren't kids asking for handouts. They were asking for a chance. For someone to say, you matter. Your future matters. Every application I approved felt like I was putting something right in the world. Like I was taking the love I'd poured into Eli for 30 years and redirecting it toward people who'd actually appreciate it. My phone had been off for almost a month when I finally turned it back on. Immediately, it buzzed with notifications. Text messages. Voicemails. All from Eli. Dozens of them. Dad, please call me. I don't understand what you're doing. We need to talk about this. Your lawyer won't tell me anything. I read through them all without responding, then turned the phone back off. But I knew it was only a matter of time before he showed up in person. It happened on a cold January afternoon. I was in my garage working on an old bicycle for a kid from the neighborhood when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I recognized the sound. It was Eli's car, the one I'd helped him buy for his first job. I kept working on the bicycle. Didn't rush out to greet him. Just kept my hands moving, kept my focus on the work. He knocked on the garage door, and I called out, "It's open." Eli came in looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy. He had stubble on his face. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked on that one word. I didn't look up from the bicycle. "Yeah. Why won't you return my calls? Why are you ignoring me?" "I'm not ignoring you," I said, tightening a bolt on the wheel. "I'm teaching you something." "Teaching me what?" His voice rose a notch. That you're punishing me for one bad night? That you're willing to throw away our entire relationship because Melissa made a mistake? I set down my wrench and finally looked at him. My son stood in my garage looking broken, and part of me, the part that loved him unconditionally, the part that had loved him since the day he was born, wanted to just make it go away. Wanted to hug him and tell him it was fine. But it wasn't fine. And that's the thing about love without boundaries. It teaches people that they can do anything and it'll still be okay. Your lawyer called me, Eli said. He told me you changed your will. He said everything's going to some foundation. Dad, is that true? Yes, I said simply. Eli looked like I'd hit him. Why would you do that? I'm your son. That doesn't seem to matter anymore, I said, picking up my wrench again. Seems like you've moved on to a better family anyway. That's not fair, Eli said, and now he was angry. I could hear it in his voice. You're punishing me. You're using money to punish me. I'm not punishing you, I said, still working on that bicycle. I'm just showing you what it's like when someone decides you don't matter. When someone decides you're not worth a real plate at the table. How does it feel, Eli? He didn't answer. He just stood there in my garage, and I could see the moment it hit him, the real understanding of what he'd let happen. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry for what Melissa did. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. But apologies without action are just words. And I'd heard enough words. You need to leave now, I said. Dad, please. You need to leave. He left. And as his car pulled out of my driveway, I wondered how long it would take before he realized that some damage can't be undone. Some doors, once they close, don't open again the same way. That's when I got the letter from Marcus, the carpentry student. He'd gotten his first real job on a construction crew. He wrote, Mr. Monroe, I want you to know that your scholarship changed my life. I have a real future now because someone believed in me. I read that letter 3 times, and then I understood something powerful. I'd already moved on. And Eli was going to have to learn to live in the world I'd left behind. By spring, the universe started balancing the scales in ways I never could have planned. Eli's company downsized. Laid off almost 100 people, and he was one of them. I found out because my sister called me crying, saying her grandson was depressed and wasn't leaving the house. She didn't know I wasn't exactly shocked. Then Melissa's boutique business started struggling. I didn't know the details, but word gets around in a small town, and people love to share bad news about people who weren't kind. The house, the one I'd given the down payment for, went on the market. Nobody was buying. I didn't feel happy about it. That's the thing people don't understand about walking away. It's not vindictive. It's not about watching someone suffer. It's just about stepping back and letting the natural consequences of their actions catch up with them. I was busy anyway. The Nora Monroe Foundation was growing faster than I'd expected. What started as a small idea turned into something real. I'd already helped 15 kids get into trade schools. Marcus was thriving in his carpentry apprenticeship. Shay passed her electrical certification exam on the first try. These weren't just statistics. These were lives changing. I got letters every week. Real letters, handwritten by kids who'd never had anyone invest in them before. Some of them were short, just a paragraph of thanks. Others were pages long, describing their dreams, their progress, their families finally believing they could be something. One letter came from a girl named Jasmine who was going to be an HVAC technician. She wrote, "My whole life, people told me I was a mess because I was in foster care. You're the first person who looked at me and saw potential instead of a problem." I kept that letter on my nightstand. Meanwhile, I started volunteering more. Weekends at the community center, fixing bicycles for kids. evenings at the high school mentoring kids who were aging out of the system. My life filled up with purpose, and the empty ache that had lived in my chest since Nora died started getting quieter. Then one afternoon in late April, there was another knock on my door. It was Eli, but different this time. Not desperate. Not angry. Just worn out. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him inside, and we sat in the living room where Nora's picture still hung on the wall. "I've been thinking about what you said," Eli started. "About the plastic plate. About me not defending you." I didn't say anything. Just waited. "I was scared," he continued. "Scared of Melissa. Scared of making things worse. Scared of losing my marriage. And I chose that fear over my own father. I chose comfort over respect." He looked at me with eyes that finally seemed to understand. "The company laid me off," he said. "And I deserved it. I'd been phoning it in for years, just coasting. Then Melissa's business started failing because she'd spent so much time being miserable that she stopped caring about her customers. The house wouldn't sell. We had to list it for way less than we paid for it just to get rid of it." "I heard," I said. "Your lawyer told me about the foundation. About all the kids you're helping. About the scholarships you're giving away." He paused. "That was supposed to be my inheritance." "It was," I agreed. "I would have squandered it," Eli said. "We both know that. Would have turned into more stuff I didn't need and more problems I didn't appreciate." I didn't disagree with him. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Eli said. "I'm just asking for a chance to be better. To be the kind of son you deserve." I looked at my boy, because that's what he was, even after everything, still my boy, and I saw genuine regret. Not the kind you feel when you get caught. The kind you feel when you finally understand what you lost. "Respect is earned," I said quietly. "You can't buy it back with words." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm starting over." He told me he was working at a construction site doing manual labor. Told me him and Melissa were in counseling. Told me they were selling the house and buying something smaller, something they could actually afford and appreciate. He told me he'd been volunteering at the community center on weekends, helping me fix bicycles. "I saw you there last Saturday," he said. "Working with those kids. The way they look at you. That's respect. That's love that actually means something." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there thinking about forgiveness and second chances and whether some things can actually be repaired. "We'll see," I finally said. And maybe that's all anyone can ask for, not instant forgiveness, but the possibility of it. Not reconciliation, but the chance to work toward it. The question that kept me up that night wasn't whether I'd forgive Eli. The question was whether he had what it took to become someone worth forgiving. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch on a Saturday afternoon when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. It was Eli, and he wasn't alone. Melissa was with him. I stood up, unsure what to expect. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. Just careful interactions at community center events and forced politeness. Melissa looked different. Less polished, more real. More like someone who'd been knocked down and was still learning to stand up again. "Mr. Monroe," she said, and the formality of it told me something. She understood the distance between us now. "Can we talk?" We went inside, and I made coffee. Sat around the kitchen table like normal people, and Melissa started speaking. "I've been in therapy," she said. "Real therapy, not just marriage counseling. And my therapist made me understand something about myself. I've always been afraid of not having enough. Not enough money, not enough status, not enough control. And when you showed up that Thanksgiving Day without calling, without fitting into my perfect plan, I panicked. She looked down at her hands. Putting that plate on the floor wasn't about you, she continued. It was about my fear. And I poured that fear out on someone who didn't deserve it. On someone who'd only ever been generous to me. I didn't say anything. Just listened. I've quit trying to be something I'm not, Melissa said. Eli and I are living in a small house now. He's working construction, learning a trade like you did. I started a catering business from home. Small, honest work. And we talk about respect now. We talk about family and what it actually means. Eli reached over and squeezed her hand. We wanted to ask you something, Eli said. We know you can't undo what you did with the will. And honestly, we wouldn't ask you to. That money is helping real kids, and that matters. But we wanted to know if you'd let us help with the foundation. I raised an eyebrow. Melissa wants to start catering dinners for the kids in the program, Eli explained. Real Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas dinners, birthday meals. She's good at it, Dad. Better at it now that she's doing it for the right reasons. And I want to help with the carpentry mentorship program, Melissa added. I'm not skilled, but I can be there. I can support the kids. I can show up. Showing up, I repeated. That's the bare minimum, you know. I know, Melissa said. That's why I'm starting there. I looked at both of them sitting at my kitchen table, and something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Forgiveness felt too simple for what had happened between us. But maybe it was understanding. Maybe it was the beginning of rebuilding something different. Not the same as before, that was gone forever, but maybe something stronger because it wasn't built on taking things for granted. Okay, I said finally. We'll try it. But understand this, trust isn't something you get back quickly. You're going to have to earn it every single day. We will, Eli said. Over the next few months, they did. Melissa cooked dinner for 20 kids at the foundation. Eli helped build shelving in our office. They showed up to every event, every meeting, every gathering. It wasn't perfect. I still had moments where I remembered that plastic plate and felt the sting of it all over again. But I also started seeing moments where Eli stood up for one of the kids. Where Melissa advocated for better resources. Where they were building something real instead of something fake. By September, almost a year after that Thanksgiving Day, I was sitting on my porch again when Eli's car pulled up. He got out carrying a box. What's this? I asked as he came up the steps. Photo album, he said, handing it to me. I put together pictures from when I was a kid. All the times you were there. All the times you showed up. I opened it, and there I was, younger, stronger, but the same. Helping him ride a bike. Standing next to him at his high school graduation. At his college ceremony. All those moments I'd given. All those times I'd chosen to be present. I forgot, Eli said quietly. I forgot all of that. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I closed the album and looked at my son. The past is the past, I said finally. We're building something different now. Something based on respect instead of obligation. Something real. The Nora Monroe Foundation is expanding, Eli said, changing the subject slightly. Melissa and I were talking. We want to donate to it. Use our own money to help more kids. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. Because that's what family does, he said simply. When we see something good, something right, we help it grow. That's what you taught me. I'm just finally learning the lesson. As the sun set that evening, I sat on my porch with my son, and we didn't need to say much. The silence was comfortable. The understanding was there. I'd walked away from my son on Thanksgiving Day, expecting it to end everything. But sometimes the worst moments are actually the beginning of something better. Sometimes you have to lose everything to build something that actually lasts. The plastic plate taught me that. And somewhere, I think Nora would have understood. That winter was different. I'm not going to pretend everything was suddenly perfect. It wasn't. But there was something in the air, something that felt like possibility instead of regret. Marcus, the carpentry student I'd sponsored, got hired by a real construction company. Not as a laborer, but as an apprentice learning the trade. He came by my garage one Saturday morning with news, and I could see the pride in his eyes. That kid had been told his whole life that foster care kids didn't make it, that they ended up in prison or on the street. But Marcus was proving everyone wrong, and he was doing it because someone believed in him first. Shay, my electrician student, passed her licensing exam. She stopped by with her certification, and we framed it right there on the wall of my garage. When she left, she hugged me like I was her father. In a lot of ways, I guess I'd become something close to that. The foundation was growing. We'd helped 30 kids now. 30 young people who would have aged out of foster care with nothing. No resources, no mentors, no real shot at building something for themselves. Now they had a chance. They had hope. But the interesting thing was watching Eli change too. He wasn't the same person who'd let his wife humiliate me on Thanksgiving. He wasn't the same person who'd been too scared to speak up. Working construction, doing physical labor, doing work that actually meant something, it was changing him. I could see it in the way he moved, the way he talked about his day. One evening, he brought me out to the job site to see what he was working on. A new apartment complex for low-income families. And there was Eli, working side by side with men in their 60s, men who'd been doing this work their whole lives. He was learning something real. Something honest. You know what I realized, he said to me that day, standing on the scaffolding looking out over the city. All my life, I was trying to be something I wasn't. Trying to impress people I didn't even like. And I was miserable. And now? I asked. Now I go home tired, my hands are dirty, I make a fraction of what I used to, and I'm happier than I've ever been. How does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, I said. You're finally being honest with yourself. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because nothing good lasts without being tested, right? And the test came in the form of my older sister, Diane. Diane called me one afternoon in January with news. She decided to sell her house and move to Florida. Retirement, grandkids, all that. And she wanted to know if I'd help her settle some family business before she left. What kind of business? I asked. There's some old family money, Diane said. From Mom and Dad's estate. It's been sitting in trust all these years. You probably don't remember, but we were supposed to get it when we turned 60. You're past that now. I'd completely forgotten about it. $40,000. Money I'd never planned on, never counted on. Money that suddenly appeared and changed everything about my financial picture. Here's the thing about money though, when it suddenly appears in your life, it reveals who you really are. I could have taken that money and used it to travel. Could have used it for myself. Could have handed it to Eli as a way of making amends. But instead, I went to my lawyer and asked him the same question I'd asked when I changed my will. Can I put it into the foundation? I asked Leonard. He looked at me over his glasses. You sure about that, Clarence? I've never been more sure of anything, I said. And just like that, the Nora Monroe Foundation had $65,000 instead of $35,000. That meant more kids. That meant kids from different neighborhoods, different backgrounds, more opportunities to change lives. But I didn't tell Eli about it. I didn't tell him I'd turned down money for myself and given it to the foundation instead. That wasn't the point. The point was living the way I believed, not performing the way I wanted to be seen. Still, Word got around. My sister Diane told her daughter. My cousin heard about it. And eventually, it got back to Eli. He came to me one night looking like he'd been hit by something. "You turned down $40,000, he said, like he couldn't believe the words he was saying. "I did," I said simply. "Dad, that was supposed to be for you. That was your money from your parents." "It was going to a better place," I said. Eli sat down hard on the porch step, and I could see something in his face shift. Not sadness. More like understanding finally hitting him at the deepest level. "You really meant it, didn't you?" he said. "This isn't about punishing me anymore. You actually believe this. You actually believe helping these kids is more important than anything else." "I do," I said. "I want to do that too," Eli said quietly. "I want to be someone who believes in something that much." And that's when I knew something had truly changed. Not just in him, but in me too. The anger was completely gone now. What replaced it was something stronger. Purpose. The truth is, sometimes you have to walk away from your own blood to understand what family actually means. Spring came, and with it came a proposal that surprised everyone, including me. The foundation had grown so much that I couldn't manage it alone anymore. I was meeting with social workers, reviewing applications, doing mentoring sessions, managing money. It was becoming a full-time job. But I was 73 years old, and I couldn't do it forever. One day, Leonard stopped by my house, and we sat on the porch talking about the future. How did I want to keep this going? What happened to the foundation when I was gone? "I've been thinking about that," I said. "And?" Leonard prompted. "I want Eli to take it over," I said. "Not now, but eventually. I want to teach him how to run it. Make him understand it from the ground up." Leonard raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a responsibility." "It is," I agreed. "But I think he's ready. And I think this is what he's meant to do." When I told Eli, his face went through about 10 different expressions in 5 seconds. "Dad, I don't know anything about running a foundation. I work construction. I barely passed high school economics." "You know how to care," I said simply. "You know how to work hard. The rest you can learn. I'll teach you." So we started. Every evening after Eli got off work, he'd come over to my house. We'd sit at the kitchen table with spreadsheets and letters from kids and financial reports. I'd walk him through how the foundation worked, how to evaluate applications, how to understand people's needs versus their wants. Melissa got involved too. She started handling the dinners full-time for the foundation kids. Started building relationships with them. She knew all their names, their dreams, their struggles. She was remarkable with them, patient, genuine, the way she should have been with me from the start. One night, we had a dinner for the kids at the community center. 32 young people, all of them having been through foster care, all of them now either in trade school or on the path to better lives. Marcus was there, talking to a younger kid about carpentry. Shay was explaining electrical work to someone who was interested in getting into the field. Jasmine, my HVAC technician, was sitting next to a kid she was mentoring. And Eli and Melissa were there in the background, making sure everyone was fed, making sure everyone felt welcome. I watched my son move around that room, and I barely recognized him. Not because he looked different, but because he carried himself differently. Like he finally understood what mattered. That's when my niece Sarah came up to me. She'd come to the dinner with Diane. "Uncle Clarence, what you've built here," she said. "It's incredible. I've been thinking about volunteering. Would you let me?" By the end of the night, Sarah was filling out forms to be a mentor. By the end of the week, 2 more people from my church had asked to get involved. The foundation was becoming something bigger than just me now. It was becoming a movement. People were waking up to the idea that these kids, the ones who'd been thrown away, the ones who'd aged out of foster care with nothing, deserved better. But there was still something unfinished between me and Eli. Something we hadn't talked about directly. And I knew we needed to address it before we could truly move forward. One evening, I asked him to take a walk with me. Just the two of us, no Melissa, no distractions. We walked through the neighborhood where he grew up, past the park where I taught him to ride a bike, past the school he attended. "I've been thinking about something," I said as we walked. "About forgiveness." "Dad, I've said I'm sorry," Eli started. "I know," I interrupted. "But I'm not talking about you forgiving yourself. I'm talking about me forgiving you. And I want to do that now, while you're here, while I can look you in the eye and mean it." We stopped walking, and I turned to face my son. "I forgive you, Eli. For Thanksgiving. For all the years of not showing up. For letting your wife embarrass me. For choosing comfort over your own father." He looked like he wanted to say something, but I held up my hand. "But forgiveness isn't the same as trust," I continued. "Trust is earned every single day, and you're doing that. You're earning it. So here's what I'm saying. I'm not angry anymore. The anger is gone. What's left is just love, and that love comes with hope. Hope that you'll keep being the man you've become." Eli's eyes watered, and for a moment he couldn't speak. "I don't deserve," he started. "None of us deserve grace," I said quietly. "We just receive it and do better because we got a second chance." We walked back to my house in silence, but it was the good kind of silence. The kind that meant everything had been said that needed saying. That night, I made a decision I hadn't told anyone about yet. I was going to change my will again. Not back to Eli, the foundation would still get the house and my remaining assets. But I was going to set aside something for my son. Not money. I didn't want to undermine what he'd learned. But I was going to create a scholarship specifically in his name. The Eli Monroe Scholarship for Kids in Construction Trades. I wanted him to have a legacy too. Not the one I'd originally planned, but a better one. One earned through redemption instead of inherited through blood. Leonard helped me with the paperwork, and he didn't say "I told you so," even though he had every right to. "You've taught your son something powerful," Leonard said as he reviewed the documents. "Most people never get that chance." "We both learned," I said. "That's the thing about almost losing someone. It teaches you what they're worth." Now here we were, months later, and I could see the future taking shape. The foundation would continue. Eli would eventually run it. Melissa had found her purpose in serving these kids. And I'd found peace in knowing that the money I'd spent my life earning was going to matter in ways I never could have imagined. But the story wasn't over yet. There was one more moment coming. One final test that would show me whether all of this transformation was real or just surface-level change. The letter came on a Tuesday in April. It was from a lawyer, and it took me a moment to realize who it was from. It was from Melissa's mother. I hadn't thought about Melissa's family in months. Her mother had never been particularly warm to me, but she'd always been polite enough. The letter was formal, professional, nothing personal in it. It said simply that Melissa's mother was very ill, probably terminal, and she wanted to see her daughter before she passed. Melissa didn't know yet. The letter was addressed to me, marked confidential. I sat with that letter for a full day before I showed it to Eli. His face went pale when he read it. "Why didn't she tell me? Why would her mother send this to you instead of directly to Melissa?" "Read the back," I said. On the back, there was a handwritten note from Melissa's mother, Eleanor. It said, "Clarence, I've watched what you've done with my daughter. I've watched her transform from someone afraid and bitter into someone genuinely kind. I don't know what you did, but you changed her. I wanted to thank you before I die. Tell her about this letter. Tell her to come see me. We need to fix things between us. And tell her I'm sorry for raising her the way I did. I'm sorry I made her so afraid." I handed the letter to Eli, and he read his mother-in-law's words with tears streaming down his face. That evening, when Melissa came home from one of her foundation dinners, Eli and I were sitting on the porch waiting for her. We told her everything, about the letter, about her mother's illness, about her mother's apology. Melissa's reaction surprised me. She didn't fall apart. She didn't get angry. Instead, she got very quiet. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "My mother and I haven't really talked in years. After I married Eli, she made it clear she didn't approve. She thought I was marrying down, settling for someone without ambition. What do you think now?" I asked. "I think she was wrong," Melissa said simply. "I think Eli has more ambition than anyone I know. It's just directed toward things that actually matter." 2 weeks later, Melissa made the drive to see her mother. She was gone for 3 days. When she came back, she'd been crying, but not the kind of crying that comes from sadness. The kind that comes from healing. "She's dying," Melissa told us. "She has maybe 2 months, the doctors think." But we talked. We really talked for the first time since I was a kid. She told me things I never knew about herself. About her own parents, about her fears, about why she was so hard on me. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I forgave her," Melissa said. "And I meant it. And then I told her about the foundation, about the kids we're helping, about how much it means to me." Melissa paused, and I could see her struggling with something. "She wants to leave money to the foundation," Melissa continued. "She doesn't have much. She's been in and out of jobs her whole life, just like my father. But she has about $20,000 in savings, and she's changing her will to leave it all to the Nora Monroe Foundation in her name." Eli reached over and squeezed his wife's hand. "She also said something else," Melissa said, looking at me. "She said she's sorry for how she treated you on Thanksgiving. She said she didn't realize how much her fear and shame had affected the way she treated people." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd held on to the hurt from that day for so long that forgiving it felt almost like betraying myself. But sitting there on my porch, listening to Melissa talk about her mother's transformation, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. "Tell her I accept her apology," I said finally. "And tell her I'm proud of her for reaching out to her daughter. That takes courage." Eleanor died 6 weeks later. Melissa was with her at the end, and she said her mother went peacefully, knowing that things had been made right between them. The foundation received a check for $20,000 with a note that said, "For the kids nobody else believes in." From someone who learned too late that belief is the most precious gift we can give. At Eleanor's memorial service, I stood next to Eli and Melissa, and I thought about how much had changed since that Thanksgiving day. How many lives had shifted. How many people had been transformed by understanding what truly mattered. The plastic plate had taught all of us something different. Me, it taught that sometimes you have to walk away to find yourself again. Eli, it taught him what respect really means. Melissa, it taught her that kindness isn't weakness. And Eleanor, it taught her that it's never too late to say sorry. But the biggest surprise was still coming. And it would shake everything I thought I'd learned about family and forgiveness. 2 years after that Thanksgiving Day, the Nora Monroe Foundation had helped over 100 kids. 100 young people who would have fallen through the cracks without someone believing in them first. We'd moved the foundation out of my garage and into a small office space donated by a local business owner. Eli was working there part-time now, learning the business while still doing construction. Melissa was coordinating all the social events and making sure every kid felt seen and valued. I was training Eli to eventually take over completely. My health wasn't what it used to be. I was 75 now, and I could feel my body slowing down. Not in a scary way, just in a natural way. Like a clock that's been running for a long time, finally starting to wind down. One afternoon, I got a call from my doctor. They'd found something during my routine checkup. Nothing dire, but I'd need to make some decisions about my health going forward. I was going to need to slow down. Maybe retire from the active day-to-day work at the foundation. I wasn't surprised. I'd been preparing for this. What surprised me was how I felt about it. I called Eli and asked him to come over that evening. When he arrived, Melissa was with him, as she usually was now. They were a team in everything. I need to talk to you about the future, I said, and I told them about my doctor's visit, about needing to step back from the foundation. I thought Eli would be nervous about taking over. Instead, he looked calm. I'm ready, he said simply. You've taught me everything I need to know. And more importantly, you've taught me why this work matters. I'm ready to carry it forward. What about construction? I asked. I'll phase out of it, Eli said. Take on more hours at the foundation. By the end of the year, I'll be working there full-time. We've been saving money, Melissa added. We own our house now. It's small, but it's ours. We don't need much. I looked at my son and his wife, and I saw two people who'd learned to value things that actually mattered. Not status. Not money. Not appearances. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing they were making a real difference in the world. There's something else, I said. Something I've been thinking about. I told them about an idea that had been forming in my mind. What if we expanded the foundation? What if we created housing for kids aging out of foster care? What if we didn't just help them with education and training, but provided a safe place to live while they got on their feet? That would be expensive, Eli said thoughtfully. We'd need to fundraise, get donors involved. I know, I said. But look what we've accomplished with just scholarship money. Imagine what we could do if we provided real support. By the end of the evening, we had a plan. Eli was going to research properties. Melissa was going to start making calls to potential donors. And I was going to step back and let them lead while I advised from the sidelines. A week later, Eli called me with news. He'd found a building, an old dormitory that had belonged to a closed community college. It was being sold at a discount price by the city, which wanted to see the property put to good use. It could fit 20 kids, Eli said excitedly. With room and board, with counseling services, with job training programs. We could do everything: housing, education, mentoring, all in one place. How much would it cost? I asked. About $200,000 for the building, another $100,000 for renovations. My heart sank a little. That was $300,000 we didn't have. The foundation had $150,000 saved up from donations and my contributions, but that was supposed to last years, supporting scholarships and programs. We could do a major fundraising campaign, Melissa suggested when we all talked about it. We could tell the stories of the kids we've helped. Show people what's possible when someone believes in you. It was a good idea, but it would require us to go public in a way we hadn't before. It would mean telling our story, Eli and Melissa's redemption, my decision to change my will, the whole journey. Are you comfortable with that? I asked Eli. He looked at Melissa, and they shared a nod. I am, Eli said. Because it's not about us anymore. It's about showing people that change is possible. That families can heal. That forgiveness is real. And maybe, Melissa added, if we tell our story, other families will see themselves in it. Other people will understand what it means to prioritize real relationships over appearances. So we started planning a fundraiser. A big event, the biggest the foundation had ever done. And we decided that I would tell the story. The whole story. From the plastic plate on Thanksgiving to this moment, sitting on my porch 2 years later with a son who'd learned what respect means. As I was leaving their house that evening, Eli walked me to my car. "Dad," he said, "I want you to know something. I know I'll never be able to fully repay you for what you've done, for believing in me even when I didn't deserve it. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You already are," I said. "Every kid you help, every life you change, that's repayment enough. That's more than enough." Driving home that night, I thought about all the things I'd been wrong about. I'd been wrong about family being about blood. I'd been wrong about love being unconditional. It's not really. Love is a choice, and it has to be earned through respect and care and showing up. But I'd also been right about one thing. Sometimes the greatest gifts we can give our children aren't material. They're the gifts of second chances, of believing they can be better, of showing them that redemption is real. And that's when it hit me, as I turned onto my street and saw my little house lit up in the darkness. The plastic plate wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. It was actually the best thing. Because it broke me open and forced me to rebuild myself around what actually mattered. The fundraiser happened on a Saturday evening in June, exactly 2.5 years after that Thanksgiving Day that changed everything. We rented the community center, the same place where I'd fixed bicycles with Marcus, where I'd mentored Shay, where the foundation had held its first celebration dinner. 250 people showed up. Not celebrities or wealthy donors looking to make themselves feel good. Just regular people, teachers, construction workers, retired folks, kids we'd helped, volunteers who believed in what we were doing. Eli opened with a simple introduction. He told them he was there because of a mistake he'd made, and because someone, his father, had loved him enough to teach him what real regret feels like. Then I told the story. The whole thing. Standing on that stage in front of all those people, I talked about my wife Nora and the life we built together. I talked about giving Eli everything I could, about thinking that material support was the same as unconditional love. I told them about Thanksgiving. I didn't minimize it or make it funny. I just told them the truth, how it felt to be put on the floor like an animal, how it felt to walk away from my only child knowing our relationship might never recover. I told them about changing my will, about the Nora Monroe Foundation, about kids like Marcus and Shay and Jasmine and 100 others who needed someone to believe in them. And then I told them about forgiveness. How forgiveness isn't something you do for the other person, it's something you do for yourself. How it took me almost losing my son to understand what real family meant. When I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in that room. Melissa spoke next. She talked about her own mother's death, about finding forgiveness at the end. She talked about how the foundation had given her purpose when she'd been drowning in her own fears and insecurities. Then Eli stood up and made an announcement that I didn't know was coming. "My wife and I have decided to make a commitment," Eli said. "We've liquidated our retirement accounts and sold some property we own. We're donating $100,000 to the Nora Monroe Foundation as a down payment on the housing project my father described." The room erupted in applause, and I felt tears streaming down my face. Over the next 2 hours, something remarkable happened. People started raising their hands. Someone donated $50,000. A local business owner promised to match donations up to $25,000. A church group committed to funding 1 bedroom in the new residence. One woman stood up and said she was going to spend her Friday nights mentoring kids through the program. By the end of the night, we'd raised $290,000. Enough to buy the building and start renovations. As people were leaving, Marcus, my original scholarship student, now a full-fledged carpenter, came up to shake my hand. He brought a young man with him, couldn't have been more than 18. "Mr. Monroe," Marcus said, "this is my brother, David. I got him out of foster care. I'm sponsoring him to join our carpentry apprenticeship program. I wanted you to meet him." I shook David's hand, and I could see the same hopelessness in his eyes that I'd seen in Marcus's eyes years before. The same look of someone who'd been told his whole life that he didn't matter. "You matter," I said to David. "You've got a brother who believes in you, and you've got a foundation that believes in you. That's more than most people get." David's eyes watered. "Thank you, sir." As I watched Marcus and David walk out together, I understood something fundamental about life. Redemption isn't just for the person who messed up. It's also for the people around them. Watching my son choose better, watching him use his redemption to help others, that was healing my own heart in ways I didn't know I needed. Later that night, driving home, I called my sister Diane in Florida. "Did you hear?" I asked. "We raised the money for the housing project." "I heard," Diane said. "Clarence, I'm so proud of you. So proud of what you've built." "It wasn't just me," I said. "Eli and Melissa, they made this real." "Because you loved them enough to hold them accountable," Diane said simply. After we hung up, I sat on my porch in the darkness, and I thought about the future. The housing project would open next year. Eli would be running the foundation full-time. Melissa would be managing the residential program. I'd be retired, watching from the sidelines, available for advice but letting them lead. I thought about Nora, about how she'd always believed that people were capable of change, that redemption was real. If she could see what her death had led to, this foundation, these kids, a son who'd learned what respect means, I think she'd be proud. The plastic plate was long gone. I'd thrown it away that night, and it had made its way to a landfill somewhere, just trash now. But the lesson it taught, that lesson was permanent. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually the beginning of something beautiful. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what actually matters. Sometimes walking away is the most loving thing we can do. And sometimes forgiveness comes not in a dramatic moment, but in the quiet understanding that we're all doing the best we can, learning as we go, trying to be better than we were yesterday. As I looked up at the stars that night, I made a promise to myself. Every day I had left, I was going to remember that plastic plate. Not as a symbol of pain, but as a symbol of how far we can come when we're willing to change. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt betrayed by family or wondered if forgiveness is possible, I want you to know something. It is. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to be free. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next story. Real stories about real people, stories about love and loss and the redemption that comes when we're brave enough to demand better from ourselves and the people we love. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if this story reminded you of something in your own life. Tell us what family means to you. Your comments inspire others to keep watching, to keep believing that change is possible. Because here's the truth. Every single one of us has a plastic plate moment. Every single one of us has a time when we're forced to choose between comfort and conscience, between taking the easy way and doing the right thing. The question is, when that moment comes for you, what are you going to do? I walked away from my son on Thanksgiving Day. But I didn't walk away from love. I walked toward it. And it changed everything. This is Clarence Monroe, signing off. Stay strong, keep loving, and remember, forgiveness is always possible. Always.